And I'll begin with a prayer as soon as that starts. And if folks talking could mute your screen, so in case there's background noise. And as soon as this comes up on YouTube, okay. So I'm going to record, and then let's have a prayer. Let's pray together. God of grace, thanks for the gift of this day and the gift of the technology that allows us to be in conversation, even across the miles. We thank you for Tracey, for the partnership that we have, for the good work that she's been able to do in Central America. And we ask that you'd bless her family and her work, and bless our conversation today, that it might continue to inspire us and open us to the moving of your Holy Spirit. We ask all this in Christ's name. Amen. Okay, welcome everyone, either on Zoom or on YouTube. And welcome to you, Tracey King-Ortega, our mission coworker, who is the regional liaison in Central America. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And she's going to spend a little bit of time with us this afternoon, giving us an update on how things are going with her and with her work, and give us a chance to ask any questions that we may have. If you are on YouTube and would like to chat in a question, you're welcome to do that, and I'll check that periodically. So thank you.
Well, welcome. Thank you for the invitation. It's good to find these new ways to connect. As we were talking before this started, is this technology existed beforehand, but somehow we didn't use it to connect. So I'm seeing with a lot of our mission coworkers around the world, in this time of social distancing, we're connecting even more, which is exciting. I prepared a bit of just like it's not very exciting PowerPoint of just an overview of kind of what I do as regional liaison. I know Davidson College Presbyterian Church has their particular partnership in Nicaragua. And so if we want to focus on talking about Nicaragua, we can do that. I really want to just have a conversation with what's going to interest you all most. But I can just, why don't let's see if I can figure this out. Yeah.
To share?
Yeah, no, I was just trying to think if this, I'm worried that my PowerPoint's a little too boring and general, but we'll just give it a try here.
You can fly through it if you need to.
Yeah, there we go. You all seeing is that working?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, great. So as Robert said, I serve as regional liaison for Central America. When I first began in this role in 2005, it was the 5 countries of Central America. So it was Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. We did some sort of shuffling around of mission coworkers in the region. So in 2013, Guatemala was taken off of my plate, as you will, which happened to coincide with the birth of my twins, which I was actually very grateful for, because Guatemala we have a lot of we have strong partners there, and a lot of it was taking up a lot of my work. So to be able to take that off my plate freed me up to focus more on the other countries. So as regional liaison, it's sort of threefold is our work: to connect with and maintain communication with local partners. I serve as a support for our mission coworkers, and then as a resource for U.S. Presbyterians involved in mission in Central America. So in that role, I do a lot of different things. And that's changing all the time, but it's because I've been in this position for, let's see, I started in this role in 2005. So 15 years in this role, even though I'm not currently living in the region, having lived there for so long, and creating those relationships, I'm able to continue to stay connected with our partners and do those roles of support and connection. Let's see, I'm trying to think some of so in the 4 countries that I work in now, our partners consist of partner denominations. So both in El Salvador and in Costa Rica, they're small denominations, but of a Reformed tradition. So we've got the Reformed Calvinist Church of El Salvador, and then we've got the Evangelical Presbyterian Church of Costa Rica that we relate to. And then in the other countries, we work with development organizations like CEPAD that you all are familiar with, and theological institutions. In Nicaragua, we partner with CIETS, which is both community development as well as theological education. And in Costa Rica, we have a very strong partnership with the Latin American Biblical University. And currently we have not including myself, there are 6 mission coworkers in Central America that I supervise. And we have an open position in El Salvador that we're seeking to fill. I don't know how much you want to know about the other countries, so I'm going to skip ahead. And I think this is Dory Halmerson. She's been in Honduras for about 2 years now, working in leadership, organizational and theological training with the Presbytery of Honduras. So that's a 3rd Presbyterian denomination that we work with in the region. And most of you, I think, or some of you have met John and Ian, who do the Delegations and Partnership program with CEPAD in Nicaragua. They did leave Nicaragua in early March, mid-March. I'm forgetting, the last couple months have been sort of a blur. But so they're actually in North Carolina right now. And I think we made a good call, and we can talk about that. But I think we made a good call in pulling them out when we did, due to the COVID-19 situation. Whereas Dory is still in Honduras, and our mission coworkers, Mark and Jenny Bent and their 2 daughters, and Carla Cole in Costa Rica, they've also remained in place or are sheltering in place during this particular time.
Hey, Tracey.
Yeah.
Interestingly, our new head of staff, Peter Henry, has I don't know exactly the nature of the connection and friendship with Carla Cole, but he's been sharing her updates with me as they come to him. We have not had a relationship with her, or to my knowledge with anyone in Costa Rica, but it's been interesting to read her updates from there.
Yeah, she's done a great job of communicating what the situation is there. And she served for many years in Nicaragua. Her husband, Javier, is Nicaraguan.
Okay.
And so they have a strong connection with Nicaragua as well. And in the last 2 years have been really connected with Nicaraguan refugees who have found a place in Costa Rica during this time since the civil uprising and situation. So that's a wonderful resource for you all as well. And I'm glad to hear that you're learning more about her. So, and Mark and Jenny, Jenny Bent is actually Nicaraguan. She was my next door neighbor when I first moved to Nicaragua in 1999. And Mark was serving as a mission worker in Nicaragua as well. But they've served the past number of years in Dominican Republic and in Haiti, and are now starting in a new role in Costa Rica with the Latin American Biblical University. The university is turning into a green university, and has really done a lot of work on creation theology, eco-theology, and kind of want to put into practice what it means to be caring for creation. And so Mark and Jenny are working on environmental sustainability for the university and developing community garden to hopefully reach out beyond just the university community, but also the physical community around the university to teach sustainable gardening practices in an urban setting. So that's exciting stuff. Let's see here. Then the rest of my slides were more about coronavirus in the region, but I don't know if you guys want to talk about that, if that's of interest. This was just like really the quick overview. The focus of my work tends to be lately a lot more focus on immigration, because of the reality of especially El Salvador and Honduras being part of what we call the Northern Triangle, which is where, when we talk about asylum seekers and migration at our southern border, a lot of that is coming from that part of the region of the world, the Northern Triangle. And so that affects our partners. Our partner in El Salvador, the Reformed Calvinist Church of El Salvador, is really focused on migration, as they've seen the impact on not just their own members, but the community around them, both as sending migrants to the US, but also receiving returned migrants, people who are being deported. So with PDA funding, they opened a shelter, temporary housing for returned migrants, to help them kind of get their feet on the ground and figure out how to reorient themselves back into life in El Salvador, which is an exciting thing. Since July, I believe they've received over 80 people, or 80, yeah, I think they said 80 different people, some family units, some individuals who have been housed in their shelter from anywhere to a couple days to a month. And some of the people that they've housed have also been internally displaced people, forcibly displaced because of violence in their country. So this has not been very organized, but what do you guys want to talk about? What are you interested in hearing more of?
So I'll ask the group if they have specific questions about any of the countries that Tracey's involved with, or particularly Nicaragua, since we've got more connections there. Or if you'd like to know more about what we do know about how the coronavirus has impacted life in Central America.
I would really like to know that, especially how it affects the rural areas of Nicaragua, if it is in fact affecting that. I know there's some in Managua, but I don't know how much.
Yeah. So here are the official numbers as of this morning. So as you can see, Nicaragua has officially 15 confirmed cases, but with 5 deaths, that's an extremely high mortality rate for coronavirus. I do not trust the government numbers. I think that they are underreporting. I think they are hiding things. And I also think they're simply not testing. And so when you don't do testing, you don't really know. I've heard anecdotally about increases in deaths caused by atypical pneumonia. I have a friend who's reported that she knows someone who, a family member of one of her colleagues was tested positive, and an ambulance arrived at their house and took that person away, tested all the other family members, and swore everyone to secrecy. I don't know if his positive test is reflected in the 15 official cases reported by the government.
Mhm.
But it's sort of, I also have friends in Nicaragua who seem to think that the government is doing a really good job about community health, in that they are visiting homes and telling people what safe practices are. SAPOD reports that in the 40 communities that they've been working, there are 540 people who, family members of those communities that have returned since the coronavirus outbreak. So these are people, some returning from the US, some from other parts of the world, but mostly from Costa Rica. So because of the fears, they decided to go back home. So these 540 people, according to Damaris, she was reporting that the Ministry of Health is keeping tabs on these people, checking in and making sure that they're healthy and don't have the virus and then spreading it. But the impact of these people returning to the communities means there's more mouths to feed. And there's also a lot of stigma around those who have returned to Nicaragua, that they're going to be spreading the virus. So that's been kind of this new reality. I did get word just yesterday afternoon. I helped SAPOD apply for a PDA COVID-19 solidarity grant, and they were approved yesterday. So we'll be sending $10,000 to SAPOD. Their plan is to put together health kits for the 1,350 families in the 40 communities that they are wrapping up their cycle with.
Mhm.
So those health kits will have basic, soap, disinfectant, masks, and they also want to try and provide additional seeds for these families so that they can continue to grow their own food. Those health kits run about $20. So it's, with over 1,300 families, that's a lot more than $10,000, but the $10,000 is a good start for them to purchase things and start distributing and impacting the families there. It's, let me see if I can find, I had there's this alternative report that I wanted to, here it is. This is what I want. All right, can you guys see this thing that says Observatorio Ciudadano? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So this isn't the most updated one, but what this is it's called the Citizens Observatory for COVID-19, and it's a group of interdisciplinary civil society that is made up of activists, people who are affected and whatnot. It's a lot of kind of Nicaraguan opposition, but they've organized their own civil group to report what they suspect are COVID cases in the country. And so their numbers are around 370 as of April 27th. And they do have kind of a spread of where the country are. So of those 370, 117 are in Managua, but they're pretty much spread throughout the country.
Yeah.
As you can see here. So up in Matagalpa, 32. So it's not a ton of cases, but it's hard to think that these, with the way it spreads, that it's not gonna continue to spread.
And a lot of people have it and don't know it and have it and don't get tested. So those are just not reported, right? It's the way it is here
Exactly.
anyway, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the next 4 to 8 weeks are going to be critical in Nicaragua.
Hey, Tracey, for what purpose would the government not report cases or underreport? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's not surprising either. They really are outliers in all of this. I mean, they continue to have sporting events in Nicaragua. They continue to promote mass gatherings. Semana Santa, Holy Week, they had all these activities going on. But it was interesting to even see there was a very high level Sandinista legislator who passed away, not of this, but during this time. And the funeral that they had for him, they had the chairs were all spread out in at an appropriate distance from each other. And you could see those images. So, and people were wearing masks at the wake. And then, but the same day there were these popular festivals of bringing, the common people together, and there was no social distancing practice. There was no masks. In fact, if you were to wear a mask before this past week in Nicaragua, you may have been ridiculed. Now they are promoting it. There are people that I've heard that really somehow believe that God will protect them. And that's why they don't have these cases, that God has protected them, that they are blessed. And it's hard for me to understand what the government gains by not responding or by underreporting. Because sooner or later, this is just going to blow up. And they don't have the capacity. I had heard, I think it was Carla Cole who told me that they have like 100 ventilators in the whole country.
God.
And I hope that's a mistaken number, but it's concerning. But the interesting thing is that we continue to see sort of a divide of those who are who support the government, who really trust the government and think the government has their best interest in mind. Then there are those who were opposition, who don't trust the government, are acting on their own. I was in the and making decisions to stay home, to self-quarantine, to be more careful. And I think, like, looking at a lot of my husband's family who's still there, they have all decided to, as much as possible, stay home and don't leave the house. One friend of mine hasn't left her house in 6 weeks because she knows that that's the only way to stay safe. Yet her husband's going to work every day. So that's a bit of a challenge of, how do you make the right precautions? But without the right information, it's hard for people to make the right decisions. Without running water, how do you wash your hands frequently? And I think one editorial I had read earlier as to sort of why the government is taking this approach talked about the reality of the economy of Nicaragua, that when you eat based on what you earn that day, when you tell everyone to stay home and you shut down the economy, people don't eat. And I think we're seeing that in this own country. One of the churches many of the churches in the Presbyterian I'm in right now, One of them had a food pantry open 1 day a week, serving 120 families. Last week in 6 days, they served over 1,500 families.
Oh my God.
And so the need, and that's in this economy. So in the economy of Nicaragua, what does that mean? So the government was saying, that's just not responsible for us to tell everyone to just stay home. And then we can look at neighboring countries, El Salvador, where they took that measure, or in Honduras, where they took that measure. And what we're seeing is maybe they've stopped the spread in some places, but at what cost? People are going hungry. Our partner church in Honduras also received a PDA grant for $10,000. And with that money, they have, and other donations that they've gathered, they've given out over 1,000 bags of basic food to families in their churches and communities, of beans and rice and oil and sugar and coffee and just the basics, because people in Honduras, let me see if I'm going to share this other thing with you all that I thought was interesting. In Honduras, so this is from mid-April, but they had they have very strict lockdown measures there. And so what I have highlighted here is the schedule, so that where it says lunes 9 to, so those are the days of the week and the time that you're allowed to be out and about, but it depends on the ending number of your ID card. So if your passport or ID ends in a 1 or a 2, you can go out and do your essential shopping on Monday. But you have to have your masks, you have to have gel, and you have to practice social distancing. So for example, our mission coworker there, Dory, she gets to go out on Fridays. And that was, her exciting, and she lives alone, so she hasn't had any contact with anybody. It's kind of, hold on, there we go. But when you have those really strict lockdown measures, people are going hungry. So in Nicaragua, I think they were trying, I don't know if they thought they could hide it. I don't know if they thought it wasn't going to come, but they're looking at the reality of another blow to the economy after the blow that they've suffered for the past 2 years is going to be even more devastating. They were just starting to maybe recover a little bit, like in the area of tourism, for example. Well, that's obliterated again. The airport is completely closed right now. There are no international flights in or out. The next flights in Nicaragua, I believe, is June 1st or 4th is the next flight.
Well, one of our long-term concerns, obviously, since the social unrest from 2018 has been, whether our partners there at CIPOD and at Jubilee House will be able to weather the economic storm that this has caused. And of course, this magnifies that. And I know that CIPOD has recently had to let some people go. I'm assuming that was a direct result from the lack of delegations coming, and I know they were already having some financial concerns, but do you know anything about their long-term plan? And are they looking at other sources? I know we've been concerned for a while that they relied so heavily upon delegations for their financial well-being. Do you know anything about the work that they're doing long-term?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think it's hard when that dependency became a part of it. I don't think it's it's not their sole source by any means, but it was a big blow to them. I think as difficult of a decision it was to let the staff go recently, it was a logical decision. I think they held on to their staff as long as they possibly could. And they were hoping that the teams would start coming again. And then with this, it just put an end to that. And it's hard to know when it will be safe for groups to start to travel anywhere, let alone Nicaragua. So, and CEPOD sort of they're in their sort of transition year. So they just wrapped up 5 years in 40 communities. And this was a year that they sort of assess where they've been and start cultivating and looking for the new communities that they will begin that whole process with over again. But because of this, the coronavirus situation, they're having to kind of reassess and see that they need to accompany more. And so they're rather than really just having pulled out of those communities, they're checking in on them, they're following them, they're figuring out what kind of what can they provide and how they can accompany them. When I spoke with Damaris early in this pandemic, she talked about the importance of listening to the health experts and following those guidelines. So I think it's that mix of finding the right things to do. I'm not really answering, I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I think that they're trying to respond the best that they're able. And the government, I think in some ways they're handling things well, and other things I think they're being very negligent, and it's concerning to see what's going to happen the next couple of weeks, month or so in Nicaragua. But as far as how CEPOD, what their sort of vision is, I think I'm not sure exactly how this impacts whether they're going to start in 40 new communities in 2021. That was their plan, but I haven't touched base with them specifically on that. I was in contact with them for this PDA grant that's focusing on the communities where they have been present. They do. They had an idea of creating some volunteer positions and having a volunteer program, but I think that's also affected in this. Emily Hughes does a good job of looking for resources and applying for grants where they're available as a source of funding for CEPOD. And was anybody from Davidson College, did they go down to the groundbreaking in February?
Jack and I both went.
Okay. So you guys actually have been there more recently than I have.
I can tell you the CEPOD USA board is sending almost $4,000 in the next day or two. I'm not exactly sure when it'll actually get there or how long it takes to actually make the trip, but there is other money in the pipeline that's going to continue at least until it runs out. And we're having another meeting Thursday to talk about other options and see where we're at.
Mm-hmm. And as World Mission, we may have some other source of funding that we can provide for them at this time. But our system is a little bit slower, which is why we were happy to be able to get the PDA funding that is going to be sent, I think, this week. But the World Mission funding that we might be able to get wouldn't be available till probably September. So, but it's tough times.
Do you have a sense of, before John and Ian returned, do you have a sense of how they were doing in terms of, they've been there, what, a year and 3 or 4 months? Mm-hmm. Do you have a sense of how they're getting acclimated and connecting with CEPOD?
I think they were doing well. It's despite the lack of groups. I think that was a bit of a frustration for them because they really wanted to be able to do more. But there just weren't a lot of groups happening. And so, but I really commend them because they were present, and they showed up to work every day, and they were there to build the relationships and to try and understand. But it's just a difficult time, I think, to jump into Nicaragua. It's very divided, and I think you have to be careful what you say and who you say it to. And but I think they were good at keeping their ears open and listening. And they yeah, but it was hard for them. It was a very difficult decision for them to leave in March. But I don't know if you all know that John is pregnant.
Yeah, she's expecting. Yeah, we knew she was
yeah,
expecting.
Due in September. So I think for that reason, it's good that she's stateside, because we just don't know what's going to happen to the healthcare system in Nicaragua. And it also, she has US residency, that if she's away from the US for more than 6 months, she was risking losing that residency, and they're hoping to get citizenship in the near future. And so at this point, with all airlines cutting service to Nicaragua, I know that we made the right decision, and they're where they need to be right now. And without groups, the reality is that they can be in communication and support and connect from wherever at this point. I had a call with them last week as they were dreaming of maybe being able to get back there this summer, at least for a visit, before it gets too late in the pregnancy to be traveling. But it's just a kind of wait and see, because we don't know what's going to happen. But I do know that they're really committed. They really felt called to this position. And I'm hoping that they'll be able to probably, most realistically, probably won't be really moving back to Nicaragua until early 2021, but which is probably more realistic for when groups might start traveling again. So.
Do you, if this continues, I mean, I'm sure there's probably not conversation about this yet, but do you think PCUSA will continue that position, continue funding that position?
That's a good, I hadn't thought that far ahead. I think we are committed to say POD as a long-term partner, as a way that we are present in Nicaragua. And so that is the role that they've asked us to play in the work that they do in Nicaragua. Okay. But I don't know. I mean, it's an important question, but I'm hoping, I don't know the answer right now. It's hard to, it would be very sad if mission work, mission teams, that kind of travel and engagement doesn't have a future.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we'll hope that on the other side of this, that will be reestablished as a relevant way for mission work to continue.
Yeah. And it's a difficult one, because I think I probably err on the side of caution with teams, and I was not always convinced that Nicaragua in the past year and a half, 2 years was a safe place to travel to with groups. And so it's a challenging one, but I do think when you have partnerships and relationships like the ones you all have established, the presence and the maintaining that relationship adds value. And what do I want to say here? It's different than a first timer coming to check out Nicaragua in the current climate. The roots run deeper, and there's more meaning there. And I think you can talk more openly and truthfully in intimate settings, as opposed to trying to just have a feel-good trip that some mission teams look for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me see what other questions others have. We do have a couple of people watching on YouTube, but no questions from that group yet. So those of you on the Zoom call, what specific things would you like Tracey to address?
Do you have any idea whether the virus has gotten out to the really remote areas? I mean, Quilombe is so close to Costa Rica, that's a little worrisome. And a lot of them have gone to Costa Rica to work and I guess are coming back.
Yeah. And actually Quilambe is up in the north, so it's closer to Honduras.
Yeah, right.
But Honduras is having a tough go of it. Their numbers are increasing, but most of the numbers in Honduras are in the north of Honduras, around San Pedro Sula. I don't think there's really any way to know if it's out in those communities.
Yeah.
My sense is, you know, with that reporting from Damaris of these 540 people have returned, and that wouldn't include Quilambe. This would be of the 40 communities that they were working
Right.
intensively in over the last 5 years.
Right.
But I would bet there'd be similar numbers in other communities.
Well,
and
sure, because
that-
a lot of them go from Quilombe to Costa Rica to work.
Correct.
I know that.
Correct. But interestingly enough, so Costa Rica has done a really good job of contact tracing, of
Okay.
testing. They have very low numbers of, I want to look at what I had here. Yeah, they've had 742 confirmed cases and only 6 deaths. So Costa Rica has a really good public healthcare system. Our
Okay.
coworkers all decided to stay because they trust the system there, that if they did contract the virus, they felt like they would be cared for.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
That the resources were there. But Costa Rica was quick to close its borders. And they also said to people that if you leave during this time, you would automatically lose your residency. So all the and a lot of Nicaraguans who are working in Costa Rica aren't necessarily there legally. They
Right.
don't have the right paperwork, but those that did have the right paperwork were going to lose it. But that was Costa Rica's way of saying you're either here or you're not. Like, we don't want people coming back and forth.
Oh, no. Mhm.
So those, I think those who left Costa Rica to go back to Nicaragua were less likely to be carrying the virus. I've heard of a number of cases of Nicaraguans who crossed illegally into Costa Rica over the past couple of weeks. And of them, some have tested positive. There are at least 3 cases of Nicaraguans who've been who recently, this was about a month ago, had recently traveled to Cuba and tested positive in Cuba. And so the Nicaraguan government claims that there is no community spread.
Yeah.
But I just have a hard time believing that. So I don't know how we're ever really going to know if it gets out into those communities. And are they going to get tested? Are they the access to
Probably
healthcare?
not.
You know, that's, you know, as I said, there's a jump or a spike in atypical pneumonia in Nicaragua. What does that mean?
Probably, yeah.
So, it's a tough question, but I think that's why it's so concerning. And I think people are still, I think life is sort of normal there for those who, like, as far as traveling on buses and things like that, those who aren't dependent on going out and about every day are staying home if they can. But
Well,
you know, there was a
Quilombe,
fight.
that's kind of the norm, you know, that's what they do. They hang out in their houses and nobody's getting on buses much.
Right.
And I guess some of them go to We Will Leave It, not much, not many of them.
Yeah.
So they're probably pretty safe just because of their lifestyle and how remote they are.
Yeah, and they're not as dependent on that daily wage.
Right,
They're more subsistence living.
right.
So, but we can hope, we can pray. I mean, and I've talked
Yeah.
even, that sense that some Nicaraguans think that, God is just going to protect them. One of my friends, Belinda Forbes, who's a longtime Methodist missionary in Nicaragua, wrote to me the other day and said, I really want to buy into what the vice president is saying, is that God is just protecting us and we're going to be just fine.
Well, we got that here. I mean, we've got people saying
Yeah.
that in the States as well. And some of these churches that have continued to meet, and they were people intercepted in the parking lot. They'll say, God is going to protect us. Okay.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah.
Dave, you had a question.
You're muted.
You're muted. Oh, Jane.
Still muted.
Just hold up a sign. Somebody hold up a sign to, there he goes.
All right. Try again, David.
How about now?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, so what I was saying was, in Nicaragua, there's not an official lockdown, if you will, but people are sheltering voluntarily. And in the other countries where there is a lockdown, what is your sense of how much mission work, how much social services are able to be provided, and how much is this disrupting the ability of our partners to actually help those in need? That's first question. The second question is, and this is a speculation, I know, but I'm just curious, how resilient do you think that these organizations are, that if when things do come out the other side, even SAPAD, which seems to be a big funded organization, will they, be so decimated it's going to take years to build back up? Or are they have a plan to kind of get in the bunker and then pop right back out when things normalize?
Yeah. Let's see. In answer to your first question, I think it kind of depends. For example, in Honduras, where our partner church there put together a plan of putting together food packets to distribute to families. They started actually their first distribution was in Tegucigalpa, because they found that the urban families were actually being hit harder with the risk of hunger than the rural community, because the rural communities were growing their own food and had the basics. But in order for them to do that distribution, they had to obtain special permits from the government. And they had to practice social distancing. They had to wear masks. They had to show, and then with their permits, when they were driving then they did go out to the rural communities, they had to have a special permit to show that they were allowed to be out for whatever reason. And in El Salvador, I think it's another place that there's been strict lockdown, but I think sometimes it's kind of gets out of control, and people just do what they want to do. But the government is really, and I think both in Honduras and El Salvador, I've seen some editorials and some political thought that it's kind of these growing dictatorships, that a lot of the measures that they're putting in place are really easy to ramp up, but very difficult to walk back. And so how much power are the governments accumulating during this time, with the justification that we're caring for the people, but then have all the power in their hands? But I also, our partner church in El Salvador, the lead pastor there also happens to work for the Ministry of Education. And so they've been, I think it's that mix, is it like a benevolent dictatorship? I guess you could say that they're trying to do it in the interest of the good, for the good of the people. They've been talking about how, distance education don't have internet, where people don't have computers. But they're saying, why can't we get funding and buy, 100,000 or what, I forget what the number Santiago told me, but they were seriously talking about buying enough computers to get one in every household in El Salvador. And with cell service these days, I think having, internet is a feasible thing. So I think people are looking for ways that even with the lockdown measures, how do we reach the people? How do we serve? The government in El Salvador was offering sort of like these stimulus checks that we had in the US. They were giving $300 to families who were locked down. But then it became chaos and everybody showed up at the government office at the same day to try and collect their money. And then you're putting everybody at risk. So I think there's a realization that the need is out there and we need to, but how it's handled is not, it's a learning game. It's a steep, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but you understand, steep curve, that's the word.
Learning curve.
Learning curve, that's it. As far as the viability of the organizations into the future, I simply don't know the answer to that. I can say that the struggles that SEPAD has right now, I don't think are new this year. I think they're exacerbated by the reality, but I think that it's, I don't know. I have not necessarily been concerned about the viability of our partner organizations into the future, that at least the ones that we as Peace USA partner with throughout Central America. But maybe I should be thinking about that more. And I think, I see SEPAD struggling without teams, but I think that the work that they do still remains, and they haven't always been dependent on teams as a source for income. So I feel like they're going to find a way. They're going to figure out, I don't know. Jack probably knows better if he's on the SEPAD USA board. He knows better than I do, maybe on the ins and outs of that. But I don't think this will be the end of them. I hope.
I do know their fundraising efforts have improved and increased. I just got my letter today with
Me too.
the same information you were just sharing about the packets for the communities. And, I don't know how, what kind of response they'll get. I'm really glad to hear about the grant that PDA gave. So that'll go a long way to meeting I think they had a $20,000 goal.
Mhm.
But anyway, that's good. I want to be conscious of our time. Our intention was a 1 hour Zoom call, but I don't want to cut things short either. So are there other questions that folks have? Jane, good to see you. And we've got a Nancy on the call, but I don't know which Nancy.
It's me,
Oh, hey,
Nancy Bondurant.
you're on. Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah, I don't have questions. This has just been so informative and so important to me. And I appreciate everybody's questions and certainly Tracey's contributions, and thanks.
Yeah. Well,
I would backtrack just a bit. I'm also worried about whether SEPAD will be able to survive this. But what things that concern me even more is who's going to take over for Damaris. She's going to retire, and she's been there. She's got institutional knowledge that you can't replace. And especially this time when things are so up in the air, it's scary, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an important point. SEPAD has not had a lot of turnover of staff over the last couple of decades. And so I think that's hard for them when, and I think they care so much about the organization that they don't, they're nervous about looking outside the organization, maybe for new ideas and new people. But my hope is that the right person, maybe with a fresh perspective, can come and breathe some new life into the organization, which is a risk. but it's also an opportunity, because so many people have grown. Yeah, I've heard so many people out in the communities and staff talk about how SEPAD is the best school that they've ever been to. So that it's really transformed them and the way they see the world and serve the world. And so it would be devastating to see it. They've that's always an organizational challenge of new leadership when you've held on to the same leadership for so long. And I think they've held on to that out of dear love and commitment to the community and the service and the vision. But yeah, I don't know what their plan is right now for searching for someone, if they've, but
Well,
I
know
want to be hopeful.
about it, and I know you all talked about it some in February, Jack. But
there is a search going on. I sat in on a board meeting, SEPAD board meeting, and it was a little bit eye-opening in that they don't function like we think of a board of directors, and that concerned me a little bit. But then again, I don't know most of those people well enough to make a determination as to if they're going in the right direction or not. I mean, personally, I wish there was someone, a logical person within the organization who's there today who could step into Damaris's role and at least have that institutional knowledge. And you're right. I mean, it's an opportunity if you bring in someone new, but it's also scary.
It's risky too, yeah.
big leap of faith.
Yeah. So I remember meeting
Well-
Damaris for the first time when I'd been in Nicaragua for like 2 days, and she was one of the first people I was introduced to. And at the time she was working for Providenic, which was a partner organization or a separate organization of SEPAD, but also founded by Dr. Gustavo Parajon. And she was his assistant there, and then moved into SEPAD soon after that. So that was 21 years ago. It's a long time.
Tracey, I would like to know if you have thoughts about how we can support you, how we can be a better support to our other partners during this particular time, beyond our prayers and beyond our messages of support and love and concern. Is there anything more tangibly we could be doing at this time?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. I think this kind of connection means a lot to me. It does. And the prayers and the support, they go a lot further than you know. I've definitely felt sustained over the years, in particular moments, and then just sort of ongoing, knowing that there's this network of folks who know about me, who support me, and who pray for me. This hasn't been the easiest past couple of years for my family, as we've kind of navigated new things. But because how do I want to say this? Sometimes I think being based right now in California makes me sometimes wonder, like, oh, am I a real missionary if I'm living in my mom's house in Southern California? But to know that churches continue to support me and feel committed to me helps me feel a little bit better about that, because I think the work, my commitment hasn't changed. My location and family changes you and the priorities of how we take care of my kids right now in the midst of this. And had we gone back to Nicaragua last year when things started going back to quote unquote normal, I think we would have just found ourselves back here at this moment in time. So I think, but this time we're here with a green card for my husband and a bit of a more security of being together as a family. So I'm, so grateful that this is our reality right now in the midst of difficult times. so I can't, I think you guys are doing, as far as, a church that connects and supports to me. I wish, I'm hoping that that I can get to North Carolina at some point and see you, because this is great, but it's not the same. It's not the same as being there in person. And so I admire the ongoing commitment. This is a long time that you guys have stayed connected to Nicaragua and done so in a way that is authentic, that really trying to do it in a way that isn't paternalistic, that isn't this feel good we're doing for, but how do we really connect and understand the reality of other people and see the world differently because of that. And because of that, I think we get a glimpse into all of God's creation and who God cares for, and the struggles of different people. And so that to me is what mission is about. And so I don't think I have a list of things you guys should be doing more of or could be doing better. I'm just grateful for the commitment that you do have.
Well, we certainly will continue to be in prayer for you and support you any way we can. And if you have particular prayer concerns, of course, we see those on occasion in your letters, but we would be happy to list those for our congregation. And we have a weekly prayer team that lifts those up as well. A couple things I'll share briefly before we wrap things up. I don't know if you knew about these things, and I'm not sure how many others on the call knew. But one is that an exciting recent development is, after our time in February, we brought back more information about a sewing co-op that they had started in Quilombe. And we connected with our Presbyterian women organization in our congregation at DCPC. And they got excited about what they were doing in Quilombe and wanted to support the sewing co-op. So we're in the process of developing that relationship, and we'll see where that goes. The other thing is, John and Ian originally were planning, our church was going to be hosting the Presbytery meeting not this next week, but the following week, but they have decided to make that a Zoom call. So anyway, that's not going to work out for them to be here. And our hope was that we could talk for a few minutes to the other churches in our presbytery about our mission coworkers and about the work of CIPAD in Nicaragua. We'll have to find another way to do that and to share some of those good stories and that good news, and hopefully engage a few more people in the work that's going on there. We will find another way to do that.
Yeah, that's too bad. They mentioned that to me last week, so that's disappointing.
Any other comments or questions before we close the meeting today?
Just thank you for meeting with us, Tracey. It's great to see you.
Yeah, good to see all of you. Thank you. So I hope I didn't say anything to get myself in trouble today.
Not with us, that's for sure.
Thank you all for being a part of this. Let me offer a closing prayer before we say goodbye. Pray. Lord of all creation, we come before you thankful for the gift of life and the gift of your love, and the gift of community. We thank you for the ways that you send us and use us in the world to share love and grace and peace. We thank you for Tracey and her calling to, her answering your call to serve the people of Latin America. And we pray for her family as they continue to readjust to changes that they've gone through, and as she continues to support mission coworkers and partners in Central America. Give her wisdom and faith and courage. We pray for our partners, especially at CIPAD and Jubilee House in Nicaragua. We ask that you would strengthen them in the work that they do as they reach out in love to their neighbors. Bless John and Ian and their pregnancy and the work that they continue to do. Help us to be good partners and to further your kingdom here in the ways that we share your good news throughout the world. Thank you for this time together. En el nombre de Jesucristo. Amen.
Amen.
Thank
All
you,
right.
everybody.
God bless you all. Take care. Peace.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you.
healthy.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.